Welcome, everyone, for another It's Not About Me. I'm Lance Barrow with the great Gary Patterson, Hall of Fame coach from Texas Christian University. And Gary, I am so thrilled to have a dear friend and one of the greatest NFL players to ever play the game, in my opinion, the great Luke Kuechly, to be our guest tonight.
Well, yeah, Luke, I'm excited because I like to talk. I've watched and read a lot about you through the years, how smart you are, how you played the game, and I'm a coverage guy, linebacker. I'm not only a physical guy, and you're one of those guys that seemed like nobody could ever get open when you covered them. So, fun for me. Somebody I can actually maybe talk X and O's with now, right?
Well, that's the best part, is just talking football. And I think I don't think I've ever spoken with you, but just chatting beforehand, football is football, and there's so much carryover. And I'm happy to be on this podcast with you guys. Well, I appreciate it. The one thing that we're still trying to accomplish, I coach a grade school football team with Olson, Greg's dad, Chris Olson, Jonathan Stewart, and Todd Blackledge, and we are 0 for 3 on opening games. We've coached the last 3 years, and we're an 0 and 3 to start the season. So that's something that we need to get addressed, and hopefully we can get that turned around this year. Nobody talks about that, which we're okay with, but we got to get that turned around this year. We're 0 for 3 to start the year. Then we play great the rest of the year, but we got to get that first game turned around a little bit.
Well, whose fault is that?
It's always, it's the coach's fault. Right, coach? It's never the player's fault.
Yeah.
It's always the coach's fault.
I'd blame it on Todd. I'd blame it on Todd. Not blame it on you.
Right?
I'd blame
it's
it on
somebody's
Todd.
fault.
For me, and I think for a lot of people, and this, we did this even with Mac Brown, Luke. I'm interested, how you got from your high school experience, how you ended up choosing Boston College. Just your path of where you came from, your family, all those kind of things. Why, how you got to be who you are, and all those kind of things, all the way to the Panthers. So for me, I love those kind of stories.
Yeah, so I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. There's a couple big high schools in Cincinnati. So St. Xavier is where I went. Moeller, Elder, LaSalle, all Catholic, all boys schools. And my grandpa went to St. Xavier. My dad, my uncle, my cousins, my brothers all went to St. Xavier High School. So inevitably, that's where I was going to end up. So I ended up there. We had a great coach there, Steve Specht. So my freshman year, we had 145 kids on the freshman football team. So as a freshman, I played on the freshman team. As a sophomore, we had a JV team of probably, 85 kids, all sophomores, basically. I played tight end my sophomore year. And then my junior year, we all moved up to varsity. And that's where I got back to the defensive side of the ball. I played outside linebacker. We played a 3-3-5. So I was the outside stack backer to the weak side. And after that year is when I really started getting recruited. The class ahead of us, which was my older brother's class, was really good. They won a state championship their sophomore year, and then their senior year, we went undefeated. We beat teams from all over the place, out of town, in town, Kentucky, Indiana, Maryland. We kind of played everybody. It was a special season. So I started getting recruited after that year by all the schools that were on my list. And then my senior year, they switched me to that fifth DB, that rover. We called it the adjuster. So I would line up to the strong side, I'd line up to the weak side. The good part is I was never in the box count, so I never had anybody assigned to block me, which was great. So it was just a flow to the ball. It's kind of a hook dropper, which was great. And then when I started getting recruited, the one school that was always on my radar was Boston College. I went to a Catholic Jesuit high school, all boys school. Obviously, Boston College is a Jesuit program. And for whatever reason, I think it was Tom O'Brien started it. Tom O'Brien was a St. Xavier guy. Obviously, got up to BC, started pulling kids out of St. Xavier High School. And then by the time I got recruited, he was already down at NC State with Dana Bible. But there was a kid at BC, I bet you for the last 25 years in a row, from St. Xavier High School. So when I was being recruited, there's a guy named Nick Larkin that was there. He was a fifth-year senior, so he was on his way out. And then Alex Albright was 3 years older than me. So when my first year at BC, he was a redshirt junior, so a senior in school but a redshirt junior as a player. So I got 2 years with Alex. And there was just a comfort there. All the kids from St. Xavier that went there had success. They played well. They enjoyed it. It felt like it fit them. The comfort of knowing that Alex was going to be there was really good for me. The comfort from my parents knowing that, they could call Alex's parents up and ask any question they want and have a really good source of information was big. And then the other two things were, academically, I wasn't going to get into Boston College without football. And my dad always told me, he said, if at all possible, try to pick a school that you wouldn't be able to get into without football. So BC was obviously that school. Couldn't get in there academically. I wasn't good enough of a student to get in there. And then when I was being recruited, that was the height of Boston College with Matt Ryan and Jolan Dunbar and, all those big defensive linemen, Ron Brace and BJ Raji, and all those guys were in the mix. So they were at one point, I think they were number 2 in the nation, Matt's senior year. So it was kind of a perfect storm of the comfort of the Jesuit atmosphere that I grew up in at St. Xavier High School. The fact that kids from my high school were there and played and had a really good time and were successful was big. The fact that they were right outside of Boston was awesome. And they were really good when I was being recruited. It was kind of the perfect storm for me of academics, football, comfort knowing there was guys there that I, grew up in the same atmosphere as with Alex and Nick Larkin. So it kind of just worked out really well for me. And, I was very fortunate when I got to BC to have a group of 8 guys. They're actually in that picture. Those are all the guys from BC. One of my buddies got married this offseason. So it was a great spot. I was very fortunate to end up there, but it was kind of the perfect storm of everything that got me to BC.
Well, another guy that played in the 3-3 and we recruited out of high school that ended up being a great linebacker too was Brian Urlacher. We recruited him and he went to New Mexico. I just left. We went to TCU, but he played for Rocky Long and he played in the 3-3 and he was kind of that extra, they call it the Lobo back, where nobody could account for him because he wasn't counted in the box. And he could play like a linebacker, but he could run like a DB just like you could. So it's I didn't know that story about the 3-3, but now it's like, well, yeah, great minds think alike. Somebody got it all straightened out anyway to get you guys in the right place.
Tell you what, I saw Urlacher down in New Orleans last week at the Super Bowl. He is gigantic. Like, I don't know how he moved the way he did. I remember my rookie year. So we traded in 2011, Panthers traded for Greg Olsen during training camp. We sent him like a late round pick and got Greg, the ultimate steal for the Carolina Panthers. But Greg was super tight with Urlacher in Chicago. So Greg was in Carolina 2011, then 2012, I showed up. And then my rookie year, we played the Bears at Soldier Field. And I just remember telling Greg, like, I want to meet Urlacher. Like, that's my guy. Like, I want to meet Brian. I want to say hi to him. I don't know what I'm going to ask him, but I just want to meet him because my roommate in college was from Kenosha, Wisconsin, was a huge Bears fan. So we all looked up to Brian Urlacher. And I remember walking up to him after the game and being like, oh my gosh, this guy is gigantic. So he was special in the sense of size, speed. Obviously, they ran that cover two system with Lovie Smith in Chicago, and um, a really good blitzing linebacker. I think he ended up with over, I want to say like 35 or 40 sacks in his career as an off the ball backer, which is pretty daggone good.
You know, we talked about Dick Butkus. When you look at Urlacher, they look like the same guy. You know, their shoulders, the way they ran, the way they went sideways to sideways, and it was amazing. They're almost like the same guys in a lot of ways.
You know, he out of high school, he was a wide receiver, free safety. He was about 195 to 100 to 200 pounds, and so he ran. I saw him when I got there. He was running in 4 different events in the state track meet, and I was like, so this guy's coming. And then in a year's time, he was 252 pounds. He was a redshirt freshman. We were just about stupid enough that we put him at defensive end. So we had our first spring scrimmage, his redshirt freshman year, and he was the boundary inside backer in the 4-2-5, and they ran speed option out of a pro look eye backs. He was the backside guy, and he didn't get cut by the fullback. He made the quarterback pitch, and he knocked the tailback out that caught the pitch probably 6 yards out of bounds for a 3-yard loss. And I was like, and I looked over at Fran because he was the one trying to get me to push to move him to defensive end. I said, well, we're going to move Stacy Washington. Stacy's only 6'2", 240 pounds, but I think we need this guy being able to go both ways. And he returned punts and kicks, probably the same thing you could have done too. I mean, it's everything that I watched when I watched you play and do. I mean, it was like, I love smart players. So, you know, when I hear people talk about you, whereas, you know, I always like to tell my kids to where they got to a place where they knew what the play was going to happen before it happened. So, you know, you look, and then you were fast enough to really make it to be able to play that play and make it look bad. And so I still listen to people. In fact, I saw a commentary on one of the games, and they said probably, I can't remember which linebacker it was, and they were talking about this guy, as far as intelligence, when people talk about him from the offensive side of the ball, that knows what's going to happen before it happens. This is the closest guy to Luke Kuechly that there's been in the league for a long time. So you get a lot of high praise. Obviously, everybody knew because of your accolades, but I'm telling you, it was always fun to watch. And even Colin speaks highly of you. I mean,
Colin, yeah, he's the best. We've had a lot of TCU guys. So my rookie year, we had Jason Phillips, linebacker. He was great to me as a rookie. And then at the end of training camp, we traded for Colin out of San Francisco. So that was a great pickup for us. And then as time went on, we had Marshall Newhouse, and then obviously now we've got Andy Dalton here now at quarterback. So we've had quite a few guys come through here from all the kind of same. I think all 4 of those guys played on the same team together. So it was a lot of fun with those guys.
Well, and that's all great people too. In fact, Jason Phillips is writing a book, and he sent me a diagram the other night about he was in the backer in the box, and he was in charge of the vertical of 3, which was the running back in a match quarters set, and he was talking about how he just didn't. It was about communication. He was talking about how he didn't understand they'd put a wide receiver at the tailback position. I said, well, that was probably more than just your fault. If there's a wide receiver in the backfield and the safeties didn't see it also, probably. But anyway, his personality, him writing a book, I'm really interested to see how that all turns out, because it's, you know, he liked to take everything by force. So him usually it took about 4 plays for him. We had to get it out of his system to where now we have to calm down and actually think about what's going on in the game, because he was kind of like that guy that wanted to hit his head on the lockers before he came out of the game. So it's good to hear that you had a good experience with him. But he's one of my all-time favorites. So obviously Newhouse and Andy and Colin also. Yeah, it's you know, people talk about coaching, but it comes down to the Jimmies and Joes. And not only are they great players, but they also were just great people. So they're also, all those guys are smart. They're smart at what they do. So,
Look, let me ask you what you guys are talking about. And they always said, You know, you picked up the game faster than anyone. You know, I got to work with you this past year at CBS Sports, and just listening to you do your questioning to coaches and players, listen to you in the game, just learning the business. You know, why do you think is it the work you put in? Is it the just football knowledge? Why do you think you had that knowledge to play the game the way you did and knew what was going on the field at the time it was happening?
I think I think it probably started in high school. I always had great teachers around me. So I think that was the one thing at all levels. You know, grade school, high school, college, obviously in the NFL. But so when I was in high school, our head coach, Steve Specht, he's still the coach there now. He'd bring us down during lunch and we'd put on old VHS tapes of whoever we were playing. We'd all eat our lunch down there with coach and we'd just watch tape. And if we had questions, we'd, run it back. But we weren't breaking stuff down. We were just watching tape casually. And, I never knew really why we were doing it, but then stuff would pop up in a game, same look, same set, same formation, same play. So you're like, oh wow, like okay, this is starting to make sense in my 17-year-old brain of why we're doing this. So then fast forward to college. I mean, we got to college and then you have unlimited tape. It's all in the computer. You can sort everything, you can sort everything however you want it, formation, personnel, down and distance, whatever you want. And I had a guy named Wes Davis. He was a safety out of California and he was a super smart player. He was an older guy. He was probably Wes was a redshirt junior when I was a freshman. He really took me under his wing and showed me how to watch film, how to break it down, why we break it down, what you're looking at, why we look at it. And then we'd be watching tape and he'd see something on tape and he'd say, "Hey Luke," he's like, "This, if say we're playing cover 4, if we're in cover 4, this gives me some issues. This look right here gives me issues in the passing game. If we get this, I'm going to play it this way and I need you to kind of bump out and help here." And I was like, got it. So then games would roll around. Westwood formation would come out. We'd be in quarters. Wes would look at me and be like, "Hey, it's like, this is a play I'm talking about." Pre-snap, great communicator. And the first few times I kind of would mess it up and Wes would come back to me. He's like, "Hey, what happened?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, that's the play that I was talking about when we were watching tape this week after practice." I'm like, "Oh." And so once you see the positive effects of watching tape, how you can get a leg up, how you can prepare, how you can understand, all right, here's a situation where I'm stressed. If I know that before the ball gets snapped based on how I've prepared, I can put myself in a better position to have success. That's where I really started to see the value of watching tape. And then as time progressed, I kind of got my own rhythm at Boston College of how I watch stuff, when I watch stuff, how I watched it in relation to maybe what our game plan looked like. And then as you get in the NFL, it was kind of the same way. And kind of what I'm getting at is the more tape you watch, the more stuff that you just accumulate throughout the time watching tapes. I mean, if it's, a 3-by-1 set and it's 11 personnel, the top runs for pretty much everybody in football ever are like 4 or 5 plays. I mean, yeah, they can have some variation, but it's your zone schemes look like this, your gap schemes look like this, your play action stuff looks like this. The more you watch, the more you understand, the more you prepare. When stuff pops up in the game, you've seen it at some point somewhere else, and it's not the first time you see it. I think for me, that's the scariest thing in my mind is I never want to see something for the first time on Sunday. If I see it for the first time on Sunday, either it's a really good play design or something they haven't shown before, or I'm not prepared. And that was something that I told myself, "Hey, you're always going to be prepared. You can do everything you can. And at the end of the day, you just got to go out and play football." But I think starting, late in high school career and then definitely early on in my college career through my end of my career with the Panthers, the more tape you watch, the more knowledge you just accumulate. It's just volume accumulation of tape and tape and tape. And before you know it, you kind of feel like you've got a pretty good feel for what teams are trying to do.
When you would study, how would you start? Like in the NFL, what was your week consist of? A lot of people think you go to practice for 2 hours, you go home and play video games all day long. They don't realize what Gary went through as the head coach at TCU, the hours that he put in. I've even had it from a TV standpoint. You do the game on Sunday, you start Monday, and it's kind of like Groundhog's Day. It's the same week until you get to Sunday again. And that's just from our standpoint. So, walk me through a week from the game ends on Sunday, getting ready to next Sunday. What would your week consist of?
Yeah, so I always started on Monday. So what I would do is we'd go in, we'd hit a workout that we were required to do through the team. Then we'd always go watch the tape from the previous week. And once that was done, I never touched the previous week. I'm like, I'm done. I don't have time to look at what happened last week. It's all right, I'm moving forward. So Mondays, what I would always do is I would always watch two first halves of two separate games within the last couple weeks. The reason I watched a first half is I always felt like the team in the first half is what they want to be. And then by the time the second half rolls around, either they're up big, they're down big, maybe they're making adjustments, but I want to know what the team looks like when they're like their game plan going into that week. I want to see what they look like. And what I would basically do is I'd click through and just get a feel. I wasn't in there super long. I would just get a feel for how does their offensive line move? Who stands out to me? What are their running backs? How do they move? Are they big? Are they quick? Are they bursts? Do they have two guys? What do they look like? What does their tight end look like? Do they have a receiver that is a game changer? And then obviously, what does the quarterback do? Who is he? What is he like doing? What makes him uncomfortable? So I just click through and just take some real generic notes and really just try to absorb, what they were trying to do. So like if you were playing, I don't know, you're playing the Niners the Falcons back when we were playing, it was like, all right, the offensive line, they're a wide zone team. It's Shanahan. The center is really good. Alex Mack, I got to be alert for him. They've got two really good running backs. Tevin Coleman is more of a vertical slasher, great speed, can get on the perimeter, bigger physical. All right, Devontae Freeman, he's quick, great burst, lateral movement, has power when he needs it, good ball catcher. You look outside on the edge, it's like, all right, well, they have, obviously Julio Jones. And so then by the time you watch, true first half, you got a really good feel for what this team looks like, what they want to do. I flush it, go home, hang out. Tuesday comes around, then I'd watch run game. So our coaches did a really good job of putting a run game tape together of, breaking them down as far as, personnel groupings, down and distance, top run concepts. We'd always look at, are they a formation-based team or are they a personnel group team? So like a formation-based team would be like, say it's 3-by-1 wing. I don't care what formation or personnel it is. I just care about the formation. Or are they a personnel team where they only run certain runs out of certain personnel groups? So once you figure that part out, now you've got a good feel for what they want to do. And then now I'm really breaking down, all right, 2-by-2 gun, boom, top concepts are blah, blah, blah. 2-by-2 under center, top concepts are XYZ, 2-by-2 Y off, top concepts, blah, blah, blah. And then that way you've got a good feel for how they want to run the ball. That was Tuesday. And I'd always watch a game after all of that. So that way I had an idea of how they wanted to attack in the run game, when they ran certain runs, what they looked like, the feel of that team. And then I'd always try to get the game plan from our coaches on Tuesday just to get an idea of how they see the game going on. Are we going to be single high? Are we going to be man? Are we looking to stop the run with, just front and coverage? Are we trying to run blitz? Are we run blitz into the tight end side? Are we run blitz into the open side? That way in my mind, when I go home at night, I can kind of see it in the sense of, all right, boom, if it's 2-by-2 and we're bringing weak side pressure, here's my line movement. This is where the ball is going to hit. Here's my gap. And then when Wednesday rolls around, that was always our first day with the team, first day with the coaches. And so when we would install run game, I always felt like I had a really good feel. And instead of writing down top runs when the coach was presenting, because I feel like I was wasting my time doing that, because I feel like I would miss the important thing that they were going to try to get across. So if it's say it's all right, hey, top concepts out of 2x2 are, X, Y, and Z. I'm writing those down. And then he's like, hey, this is how they're going to block it against our set. If I wasn't prepared, I feel like I might miss that. So when we go in and they'd install it and they had like little, really good, important things I needed to make sure I knew, I'd make sure I wrote them down and I could see it on the film. So I feel like I wanted to go in the meetings and be prepared for the meetings and be prepared for like the true coaching point. I feel like it was my job to figure out what they want to do, how they want to attack us. And then when I got into meetings, it was my job in the meetings to understand, all right, here's the coaching point for that play. And then on Wednesday, it was first and second down pass. So play action, drop back. How do they marry with the run game? Same formations, different formations. And then I'd watch a game to see kind of how it all went together. And then Thursdays was third down, and I learned this the hard way, that it's always important on third down in your 3 to 7 windows to watch a team that looks like you on the defense side of the ball. I remember early in my career, I don't know who we were playing, but I watched it was like the Patriots, like 2 or 3 other teams that were heavy man teams in pretty much all windows, man dog, true man, whether it was too high, whether it was robber, whether it was dog, something like that. And so when I get into games, I'd sit and I'd anticipate all these man beating routes, and we'd be sitting in zone coverage because we'd be more zone. And I remember coming to the sideline and the coach would be like, what are you looking at? And I was like, well, when I was watching tape, everything in this window was like mesh, pick, some sort of exchange route. He's like, yeah, who did you watch? And I'm like, these teams. He's like, well, they're man and we're zone. So I kind of had to learn that the hard way. But fast forward, I was like, all right, I need to watch teams that more resemble what the Carolina Panthers do on the defense side of the ball. So that made a lot of sense to me. And then on Fridays was always red zone and in specials. So red zone's pretty straightforward. How do they want to attack us in the red zone? How do we match up? Who are their guys? Do they line up in certain areas? Do they put a receiver at number 3 to get a matchup on the Mike backer? Because we played a lot of match quarters. And then for me, specials was like, all right, are we playing the Saints? I have to make sure that I know what are Kamara's top releases? What does he like doing out of the backfield? Does he have a certain foot he likes to plant off on a choice route? Where does he want to get to? Obviously on a choice route, everybody wants to get over the ball. Say we were playing, I don't know, the Niners and they had Kittle, or the Chiefs and they had Kelsey, or, they had some sort of gadget guy that I wanted to know. All right, when Kelsey lines up at number 3 in a 3-by-1 look and he's flex and he's in a 2-point, what are his top routes? What does he like doing? How does he run his route? Does he plant off a foot? Does he, the way Kelsey catches the ball and turns that field is very different than a lot of guys. So Fridays was always like a specials day for those type of guys that were unique in how they played the game, or unique in how they came out of the backfield. And then I'd watch another game. And by the time the week ended, I had a pretty good feel for what teams are doing. And then on Saturday, I'd always just review my notes. I didn't like watching tape on Saturdays. I was kind of done. But I would just review everything. And if I had questions, I could go ask them. And by the time the week ended, after that Saturday night meeting, I felt like I had a really good feel for not only what we were thinking they were going to do, but how we wanted to attack them. And then obviously, I think the most important thing is to understand, where is your stress? What stresses you in a game? Is it alignment? Is it a skill player? Is it a formation? Is it a certain route concept that scares you? You got to have all those answers, or those questions answered before the game rolls around. And then when the game rolls around, it's like, boom, where's my key? And then go play football.
Did you ever get to a point that you thought you were over prepared, as John Madden would say, the buckets fill? I can't put any more
Absolutely.
thing in the bucket. Or did you ever have a game that you didn't think you were prepared enough?
Yeah, there was oftentimes in the preseason, and this sounds bad, but I'd just be, I don't know, it'd be the third preseason, like first preseason game, we play like a series, and the team that you're playing is going to run They're going to run wide zone. They're going to run one back power. They're going to run play action. They're going to run sticky 3-step. So you're like, all right, I can figure that out. The second game, you watch a little bit of tape, but that third game, we'd usually play, into the second quarter, sometimes a half, and you can get exposed quick if you're not prepared. So a couple of those preseason games, you're gonna be like week 3 or 4 training camp, and you're like, man, I'm tired. Mentally, I'm exhausted. And so there was a few of those games in the preseason where I'd be like, man, like for my own mental sanity, I just need to take a little breather. So some of those games I'd feel underprepared, which I didn't like that feeling. And I think that helped motivate me to make sure that during the regular season, I was good to go. But to answer the second part of your question, there was a game, I remember it super vividly. I want to say it was 2018. We played Atlanta at home, and they lined up in, it's 2017, 2018. They lined up in like it was a 21 look, slot to our right, tight end left, and a nub look, I back. So they were showing a lot of like front side zone, front side power. We, lead weak. We were a big time bubble team to the one to the backside, the open side. And the one play that stressed me big time was front side bounce CG. They pull the front side guard, down block on the 3, and then pull the center and cut the backside shade. And Alex Mack was super athletic, great angles, really good burst to the second level. And so that whole game, mentally, I was like, hey, if they run bounce sheet, you got to go. Like, if you don't go, you're not going to get there. He's going to cut you off, and then they're going to gash us. So I remember sitting, and they lined up in that look probably, I don't know, 10 times, 10, 11, 12 times. They ran the ball, they threw it, they ran lead weak, they ran backside toss with the crack from the slot side. I was guessing the whole game, and they never ran it the whole game. And I remember the back judge came up to me, the official, and he's like, are you all right? I was like, yeah, why? He's like, you're off. He's like, something's wrong. I said, I'm glad you said that. He said, I've been sitting on a run the whole game, and they haven't run it one time. And to me, I'm glad he said that to me, because it gave me really good perspective on, you can't wait for plays to happen. You just have to understand where your stress is, and you have to be very quick to process when that ball gets snapped, when you read your keys and go. So yeah, I think there's a fine line between being prepared and being over prepared. And I felt like I always had a pretty good feel for what that felt like, what that looked like in my preparation during the week. But yeah, that Atlanta game at home, that look, I just remember, I love that look, because if you can push past that front side center and you scrape tight, it's a kill shot on that run back. He doesn't see you. He doesn't see you because you have a corner, and then you have support, and you have a weak side backer. You're clean once you pass that center, and it's like a kill shot. And they never ran it. I was sitting on it, and it negatively affected me during that game, because I was sitting on a play that never happened. Instead of really just processing, reacting, I don't know if anticipating is the right word, but I was waiting on a play that was never going to happen.
Well, you didn't give yourself enough credit. They knew that they couldn't cut you off.
Yeah,
That's
well,
probably why they forgot
Kyle
that
Shanahan, I love him, and like Sean McVay. I feel like Sean McVay, obviously great. Sean Payton, I played against him, twice a year. I loved playing those guys, because I felt like I had a really good feel for who they were as a team. But then on the other side, obviously they had a really good feel for who we were. So there was that back and forth. And then Shanahan, I played against him as a rookie in Washington. Then he was up in Cleveland. We played against him in 2014. 15 rolls around. I think he was in Atlanta at that point. And then from Atlanta, he goes to San Francisco. And I felt like we played those guys every year. And I loved playing against Shanahan. I like him. I like his attitude, his edge, his confidence. I like their run game. Their pass game is really good. They were just so fun to play against. It was very challenging. But that's what you want, is you want to play against good teams, well-coached teams. And I think I was just so fortunate to have that opportunity to play against guys like that and coaches like that.
Do you, we have a few more minutes, Luke. You played with one of the great quarterbacks in NFL history in Cam Newton. Gary and I were talking about it before you sat down. I was thinking, did you ever tackle him in practice or any other time? Because that's got to be a full day job because he's so huge.
That was always the joke. Was we'd always talk. Thomas and I would always talk. Thomas Davis and I would always talk a huge game about Cam. Like we'd smack you, we'd stuff you on 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, blah blah blah. And it was always understood you could talk as much junk as you wanted, and you could say whatever you wanted, whatever it was, because you knew and he knew that it would never happen unless Cam was on a different team, which wasn't going to happen. It was never going to happen, and I would have wanted nothing to do with it because he's gigantic. I don't think people understand how big and physical and just strong he is. He's like concrete running. And so yeah, never had to hit him. I'd always run, you'd run right up to him and then just run right by him. And he always knew that you couldn't hit him. So that big toothy smile that he's always had, you'd run right past him. He'd start chirping a little bit. And that's what made it fun. Was you can get literally as close as you want to him, but you better not lay a hand on him or else you're going to hear about it. So he knew that, we knew that, we felt comfortable, talking junk back and forth, but I'm glad I never had to hit him because that dude is gigantic.
Yeah, it was amazing. We'd be in team meetings with you guys, and he'd walk in, and just seeing him sit in the chair and seeing him stand up. And I remember being at Mr. Richardson's funeral at Wofford, and he sat like 2 chairs from me, and I was just amazed how large of a human being that he is, and he's playing quarterback.
He's gigantic. Like he's so big and physical and strong and powerful and competitive and just I think when we walk out for coin tosses and it was a team that we hadn't played for a while, like we don't, maybe it was an AFC team or something, guys would look at him and you could see on their faces like, whoa, like he's big already. And then he puts on the shoulder pads and he wears that big flak jacket and he's got, these big things on his shins and he's big already. And then when he puts all his gear on, he's even bigger. And it's like, hey, I'm glad he's on our team.
I always like asking guys this. Gary, I've talked to him about this. In the NFL, you see your schedule. And was there a place that when you would see a schedule, a place to play, like Lambeau or Cowboys or whoever it was, not only the team, but you would go, wow, I can't believe we're going to go play at Soldier Field or Lambeau or wherever it was. Was there a place in the NFL that you couldn't wait, and when you came out on the field for the first time, you just kind of looked around and took everything in?
Yeah, I love NFL stadiums and the history behind these stadiums. And so, it's funny, schedules come out and I'd always look for when is the Thursday night game. I'd love to play an early Thursday night game, like week 4 or 5. So you get like a mini bye and then a late true bye. So then your season was broken up. But then I'd always, like, if we played, who you were going to play going into the year before the schedule came up. But what I always looked for is I always wanted to play I loved Lambeau. I loved Soldier Field. And you want to play in those places late in the season and really get that true Lambeau experience. My last year in Carolina, we played at Lambeau in December and it was a 4 o'clock game. It was cold. It was like 15, 20 degrees. We came out after halftime. It's dark. There's flurries coming down. The field is like that like when the lights come on at Lambeau, it's a different colored grass. It's a little bit lighter because it's getting late in the season. The flurries are on the field. There's a little bit of accumulation. That's how football in my mind is supposed to be played. Is outside on grass late in the season when stuff matters is really special. Obviously, Soldier Field is just a special, unique place. I mean, it's cool. It's in Chicago. I'm a big defensive guy, so Singletary, Dick Butkus, obviously Briggs and Urlacher, and there's so much history there. And then I was lucky enough to play um, at Candlestick. So my second year, we played the Niners at Candlestick. So I mean, you look at the old Niners with Jerry Rice and the catch in the end zone, and all of that is what I think is cool about NFL stadiums is these older historic stadiums that have had big playoff games and we played at the Coliseum against the Rams. I don't know what year that was, 2016 when they were building their stadium. That to me is cool. Historic fields, um, outside in the elements. It was just so special. I loved playing at in Philly against the Eagles. That was a unique place. It was fun, loud, great energy. Um, then Seattle. Seattle was a really cool place to play. It was challenging. That home field advantage they have there is very real. Like that 12th man that they talk about, they're not just talking about it, it is for real. So um that's what's so cool about the NFL is each stadium has its own experience and its own fans. And um you just hope you go in there and play well. And I think the best sound in a away stadium is silence. If there's silence in an away stadium, coach, you know about this.
No,
If
that's why I already started laughing. It's like, yeah,
Yeah, the best sound in an away stadium is nothing. It's your sideline making noise and no one else. That means you're doing something good and probably a pretty critical portion of the game. So you love playing on the road, you love playing in hostile environments, and you hope at the end of the game it's real quiet in there because you've taken it to them.
Yeah, I also when you would get the schedule, you played 2 games a year against Drew Brees. You had your former teammate Matt Ryan in your division, on and on and on. When you would look at a schedule, and I kind of this is kind of a crazy question. I remember a friend of mine asked Jack Nicklaus once who intimidated him, and Jack Nicklaus looked at him like, are you from Mars? Nobody intimidated me because I'm Jack Nicklaus, which you understand. And I ask you a question: was there a player or players in your career that you would go, man, I got to really be on my game to beat this guy or these guys on these teams?
I think probably Drew and Sean Payton there in New Orleans, and they were so good. And you look at schedules. I would always want to play them at home late in the season. Late in the season, you hope it's cold, you hope it's raining, you hope the weather sucks, you hope it's nasty out because if it's a clean game and it's nice weather and it's 70 degrees, it's like it's like they score more points. The nicer it is, the more points they score. And it's like most teams, it doesn't matter what the weather is, they're going to score the same amount of points. For whatever reason, with the Saints, if it was nice out, it's like they scored 7 more points. It was like Vegas would give them 7 more points because it was nice outside. So you hope that when you play the Saints, it's it's not snowing, but you hope it's like 37 and just pouring rain. So it's nasty, it's wet, it's cold, and hopefully it slows them down a little bit. But they were so efficient, they were so fast, they knew exactly what they're doing. When they can throw the ball, they're super dangerous. So yeah, Drew obviously and Sean were so good together. You just hope you play them and the weather is terrible outside.
You were also during that era. What was it like, real quickly, playing against Brady, playing against
Yeah.
Peyton Manning, playing against Philip Rivers, Ben Roethlisberger, who you want to talk about big is right up there with Cam, and on. The guys I'm not even mentioning, but those guys in your era, what was it like playing against those quarterbacks?
But it's scary playing them because no lead, no lead is ever big enough. I mean, we played in Foxborough in 2017 and we went up a couple scores. And it's one of those things with him. It's just a matter of time before he kind of figures out what's going on.
Tom Brady.
It might be the first quarter, it might be the second quarter, it could be the fourth quarter. And we played them in 17. And I remember being on the sideline and being like, damn it, this clock just needs to run 4 times faster than it is because he's got it figured out. And now we just have to kind of stop the bleeding until that clock hits 000. And same thing with we played we played the Packers at home in 15. We went out on a big lead. We were up on them, and slowly they started to kind of claw their way back in the game. And you're like man, like, and Thomas picked the ball off at the end of the game to seal the win. But those guys, it's really just a matter of time before they figure out what's going on. And then when they figure out what's going on, it's kind of like, uh-oh, like we better keep scoring points on offense, and we better bleed that clock on both sides of the ball as much as we can, because you play Brady, you play Aaron Rodgers, you play Breeze, you play Peyton and Phillip. They're gonna score. It's just a matter of when do they figure out and when do they start scoring in bunches.
Gary, you could argue compared to now, I guess any time of a history in the NFL, you could argue what was the best time, with quarterbacks or defense or whatever. When Luke was playing, you could argue it was maybe the pinnacle of quarterbacks in the NFL when you go down that list of players that you would play and the player and the quarterback you had on your team.
Yeah, I mean, well, all the names you just read off. I mean, it's like, to me, it would be tough on him when you're going to have to play all these people back to back. So, I mean, if you had a stretch where you had 3 or 4 of those names that came up and you had to play them back to back, to me, is from a defensive standpoint, it's pretty soon you run out of looks. I mean, you'll run out of looks of what you can do. So at some point in time, you just got to make plays. And you got to be better at what you do than what they do. And because older quarterbacks, right?
Sean McDermott thing for us was, he's like, this is what we are. We're going to get really good at it. We're going to tackle really well. We're going to play sound football. And every once in a while, they're going to hit a play, but we're going to do what we do really well. And they have to beat us. Make them beat us. Don't give them stuff. Don't give them easy points. Don't give them easy looks. Make them play football. Make them drive the field. Make them make the mistake. We're not going to make a mistake. We're going to tackle really well and be very sound at what we do.
You also, like yourself, you're a competitor. You're a great guy, but you're a competitor. And when you see a Brady, an Aaron Rodgers, a Peyton, Cam, Drew Brees, Phillip Rivers, these guys, Roethlisberger. I mean, I'm leaving out a couple guys. Matt Ryan. They're all great guys, but they will rip your heart out, and they switch. Yeah, they are such competitors. It's a great lesson in watching how to be successful, not only in football but really in life and business and anything you go into. The way they handle themselves, just like the way you handle yourself.
Yeah, we had a guy, Jordan Gross, played offensive tackle for us for a long time, and he always said 2 important things with football, amongst other things. You got to show up, and you got to give you fill in the blank. You got to care. You got to show up to play hard. You got to show up to compete, and it's got to matter to you. And if you show up and it matters to you, you put yourself in a good position. If you show up halfway in, halfway out, 1 foot in, these guys that are good are going to embarrass you. And that's why you play, though. If it was easy, it wouldn't be fun. So, you play these guys back to back to back, like you talked about, Coach. You better show up and bring it, because if not, these guys are going to embarrass you.
So you asked Colin, I got to a point, and I hate talking in third party, but I got to a point where they knew there was Coach P and there was Gary. Would you say, as yourself, was there a time when you felt where you flipped that switch, where you felt like you became Luke Kuechly? Did you feel like that you knew when you needed to flip the switch and you became a kind of a different mindset, different person, when you walked out of the tunnel? Or do you think it just kind of evolved? Because that's what I had to do. I had to say, look, you want to deal with Gary or you want to deal with Coach P when it came to off the field deals? It's kind of like take care of your business. But, they always knew on the field. I said, how do you want me to coach today? Can I be Gary today? Can I just listen, you guys prepared, you got ready to go? Or do I have to be Coach P because I've got to start getting you fired up to go do what you needed to do? Did you feel like that you had that flip the switch? Because it seems to me that as nice a guy as you are and then I watch you play on TV, and it's like, yeah, this guy's got to switch.
Yeah. So Coach P's your alter ego, huh? You're
Yeah,
Gary right now.
yeah, yeah. This is Gary. I've been Gary now for 4 years. Luke, that
Yeah.
it's great. I haven't had to raise my voice. Haven't even been mad at the dog. I mean, it's all great.
Luke, I'm not for sure when Coach P's around or Gary around. I'm with him a lot, and I'm not for sure still which one's around.
Hey, I think it's hey, you know what it comes down to is guys are competitive, guys want to win, and you know, it's just football it's so competitive that if you can't turn it on and off, either you're a complete psychopath and it's on all the time and you're difficult to deal with, or you can kind of compartmentalize and you got, Gary and Coach P, and when it's time to get competitive and it's time to have fun, it's time to get after guys, get after somebody else, you can turn it on. And then when you're you're off the field, you're away, you can just be normal. I think that's part of the fun of the whole thing is it gives you a great outlet to go be competitive, have emotion, have fun, be with the guys, and it's largely accepted as normal to kind of have a different view on things when you're playing.
Gary, one of the great things about doing the Carolina Panthers back in the day when they had it going, and Luke was on the team, Cam, Ron Rivera was coach, and you think about Sean McDermott was on that team, Dennis Allen, and a lot of those coaches that went on to become very successful. They also had Danny Morrison, who was president, Mr. Richardson, one of the great men and his family I've ever been around. But on Friday, we would go in and watch tape. Phil Simms, Jim Nance, Mike Arnold, Tommy Spencer, myself, our crew. Then we'd watch practice. And then Charlie Dayton, who was the legendary PR person of the Panthers, who was also with Washington and Atlanta, who I've known all my life, legendary Hall of Famer. He would invite us to come eat lunch before we met with coaches and players, and it was Bojangles fried chicken day. And I'm telling you, that was the best lunch of really almost any other team we went to because of Bojangles, and I always appreciated the great Charlie Dayton for allowing us to
Little
do
chicken
it.
supremes on Fridays, a little dip with the boys. Can't beat it. A little honey
Yeah.
mustard.
Charlie would come, and then we'd known Ron Rivera forever. Maybe Mr. Richardson would show up. A couple of the guys would sit down. And one of the great things, we always did the Wells Fargo Golf Championship and be through Steve Luquar, who's a PR man at Charlotte, and Danny Morrison. I got to know Luke, and Luke would park in our TV compound, and he'd bring the offensive line guys on Wednesday and Thursday or whenever you guys would come, and I'd walk in the office, and there would be half the offensive line and Luke and a few other guys from the Panthers sitting in the office, and it was great. You guys were always great, Luke, and I've always appreciated our friendship and the time that you spent with us, not only work-wise, but just hanging out, having dinners in Charlotte. Here's my last thing. You retired. You were a scout. I don't know if you really thought about coaching. I got to work with you this past fall at CBS Sports as an analyst on a college football game. You do radio for the Panthers and so many other things that you do. What do you think that will you ever think about being a coach? Do you ever think about being a part owner of a team? What is your future looking like?
Yeah, so obviously the game of football is still very, very important to me. A lot of what I do revolves around that. So I've done the radio the last 3 years. It's awesome. We've got a great crew. David Langdon's is my boss man. He's our producer. Anish Shroff is our play-by-play guy. He's phenomenal. And then Jake Delhomme is the other color analyst, and he's phenomenal. We have a great crew, and I have a ton of fun with that. Like you said, the CBS stuff with you guys was phenomenal. It's just I love talking football. I love being around the game. Do I ever coach at a high level? I'm not sure. I like what I'm doing right now a lot, and I think I would have to say no to a lot of things to coach. And but what we do is, like I mentioned, we coach a grade school football team at Charlotte Christian. It's Greg Olson, Jonathan Stewart, Greg's dad, Chris Olsen, and Todd Blackledge. So I kind of get my football fix in a lot of different ways, whether it's, the 7th to 8th grade team, we have a ton of fun with that. The kids are awesome. The radio with the Panthers, and then doing the CBS stuff this year was a lot of fun. So I have plenty of touch points with football, and I'm in a pretty good spot with where I'm at right now. I'm having a lot of fun, and I think that's kind of the name of the game now is do what you enjoy, do what you have fun doing. Because I think when you start doing stuff that you don't enjoy, you're not as good at it. So I like what I do a lot, and I feel like I'm trying to find ways to keep getting better doing kind of all three of those things.
And what I was impressed working with Luke, and I don't mean to talk about him while he's here, he brought a lot of joy, and like he said, enjoy what you're doing. He brought a lot of joy to the game and getting ready for the game. It wasn't like, hey, I'm Luke Kuechly and I'm ready to talk football. He knew about Liberty University. He knew about Jacksonville University. He knew about what was going to happen in the game, and you could see the joy that he brought to it. And that's a great way to look at it. A lot of former players think they might know too much, but man, you were just like you were playing yourself, and you worked very hard getting ready for that game at CBS Sports.
You
It was
know,
fun. I appreciate it.
well, I would tell you as a coach, that's the kind of guys that you never had to be. When I was talking earlier about Coach P or Gary, you never had to get out of Gary mode, because when the coach understands that the player is just as important to him as it was how I prepared to be able to get him to that game, because it's about your job and keeping your job and doing all that. And when you had players, one of the greatest stories about Andy Dalton, and I told it on one of our first podcasts, was we're going to play the Rose Bowl against Wisconsin, Luke, and we were talking at the beginning of December about the calendar. Here's where we got finals, coaches going recruiting, here's when we're going to practice. And the year before, we'd got beat in the Fiesta Bowl. And Andy Dalton held up his hand and he said, is that in stone? I said, no. And I thought they wanted more time for Christmas. He said, look, we got the rest of our lives to have Christmas with our families. We're only going to get one chance to win a Rose Bowl. I knew right then that my job was over, because it was already an ownership. And you should have known that anyway. They were 36-3 in their last 3 years there. And so it was like, okay, I'm the only guy that can screw this up. I can't over practice them. I can't do all this. They're going to listen to everything we had to say. And so, I would say that probably as a coach, it would have been a lot of fun to have had an opportunity to coach some of you, because I would have probably said, well, so Luke, what do you think we should call here? I think,
yeah, right.
That's
covered, baby.
Well, that's one of the reasons why, I've thought about the NFL as kind of like one of those things where when you have people walk in the room into a meeting that've been doing it for a while at a high level, and to be able to hear their input, because as you know, if you believe in it's going to really work because what you call and what's going to be called and how it happens, then you're going to do it better. It's like, and so it's harder to get a college team, that high school level, to go to college, and then how they prepare at college. And I'm sure it's even about 3 more levels up for the NFL group, as far as when you're done, because of the experience and the people have been in the game for so long. It always mesmerized me to understand this would be really cool to watch, and now to listen to you talk about how you prepared, because you just talked about how Luke did it. How you got ready for the week, and you didn't even say anything about how then also the coaches also, and for me that would be so much fun to understand. I'm sitting in a room and they're calling it out before I even have to say anything. So hats off to you.
I appreciate it.
Luke, Gary Patterson and I can't thank you enough for taking the time. Like I've said earlier in this, I appreciate always your friendship. I appreciate the time you've given Gary and I. I've been sitting here thinking I'm sitting with 2 of the great football minds that has ever played the game and has ever coached the game. And what a privilege it is this morning to be with both of y'all. And thank you for being, I don't know how we keep topping this, Gary. first one we did, It's Not About Me, was just Gary and I talking. And then we had Jim Nance, who that speaks for himself. And then we had a guy who won a national championship, Mac Brown. That kind of speaks for itself. And now we had a guy that we should be calling an NFL Hall of Famer, in my opinion. And that will be happening one day. And I look forward to hearing that announcement in the great Luke Kuechly. So, Luke, thank you so much. We look forward to being with you soon and seeing you again. And I hope this fall we'll get a football game at CBS to get to do together.
That's right. Well, I appreciate you guys having me on here today.
So for Luke Kuechly, Gary Patterson, I'm Lance Barrow. It's Not About Me, the podcast. Thank you, Luke.
We'll see you.